You know, sometimes a few careless words can change an entire life. He once said 4 words to her, cold and merciless. "I'm busy. Handle it yourself." 3 years later, he saw her step off an old bus, holding the hands of 2 little twins, their grey eyes identical to his. That moment shattered his world and marked the beginning of his redemption, a love reborn amid the storms of America. Tonight, I'll tell you their story, the story of Underh Hill, a man who once had everything, lost it all, and learned the simplest lesson of all: how to stay. If you're listening on a rainy night, sit with me for a while, because somewhere in the rhythm of the falling rain, you just might find a piece of your own heart in this story. Portland glows when it rains. This city has its own way of being beautiful in sadness, the scent of roasted coffee mixing with wet asphalt, lights reflected on puddles, people rushing past one another as if everyone's running from something. On the top floor of Underhill Tower, a 68-story glass building, Underh Hill sat alone in an office so large that even the sound of a pencil tapping echoed coldly. Behind the glass stretched the whole city. In front of him lay a contract worth nearly $100 million. But no one ever told him that no amount of money could buy the warmth of a heartbeat in the middle of the night. Jay was the kind of man others both respected and feared. From a child raised in foster care, he climbed up step by step, driven by hunger, by iron will, and by one unshakable belief: if I'm strong enough, no one will ever leave me again. Oh, and to be that strong, he traded almost everything: friendship, weakness; love, a threat; trust, a luxury. He believed only in work, numbers, and his own 2 hands. His penthouse mirrored who he was: flawless, precise, nothing unnecessary. Glass, steel, concrete, polished to perfection, cold to the touch. No family photos, no soft blankets, no flowers on the table. Underh Hill's success was like a glacier, dazzling to look at, freezing to feel. That morning, Portland was soaked in rain, the kind of long, misty drizzle the Pacific Northwest never seems to tire of. He was meeting with the design team about the new headquarters, his most ambitious project yet, a landmark meant to be visible from anywhere in the city. His legacy, as he called it. Then the door burst open. A woman's voice broke through, breathless and wet from the rain. "Sorry, the elevator's stuck between floors. I had to run up." Jay looked up. Standing there was a young woman with dark brown hair, soaked through, her shirt clinging to her skin as she held a roll of blueprints tight to her chest. Her eyes gleamed not with defiance, but with conviction, the kind that doesn't belong to office workers, but to people who believe in what they do. "And you are?" Tarara Allen, newly assigned to the Underhill Dynamics headquarters project. Everyone in the room exchanged glances. No one came in late and spoke like that, especially not to Underh Hill. But she stood tall, spreading her blueprints across the spotless glass table. "I made a few changes to the main lobby design. I think you should see them." Jay arched a brow. His voice was low and sharp as cut steel. "You think I don't already know what's best for my own building?" "I think you understand architecture," she said evenly, "but maybe not the people who live inside it." Silence. The air in the room froze. Jay stared at her. For the first time in years, he felt challenged and not angry about it. Maybe because she was right. His design was beautiful, cold, perfect, and utterly soulless. Hers light streamed through it, with small gardens and spaces where people could breathe. The rain outside shimmered silver across the table, reflecting 2 faces, one cold, one burning bright. That meeting lasted over 3 hours. Everyone else left long before Jay and Tara did. They argued, debated, laughed, argued again. And for the first time in years, Jay laughed not the polite kind, but the kind that bursts out from deep inside. When she finally left, leaving behind a half-finished cup of coffee, the office suddenly felt emptier than ever. And that night, Jay couldn't sleep. He opened her HR file, something he never did for anyone. Born in Maplewood, graduated from the University of Oregon in architecture, recipient of a humanitarian design scholarship. A clean record, but one note made him stop. Designs with emotion. Always asks, are people happy in this space? That question haunted him for days. Are people happy? Was he ever happy? The next day, she came again on time, this time with a new sketch. Jay told his assistant to clear the rest of his schedule, just to talk to her longer. They studied the lines together, but in the quiet spaces between, Jay found himself looking into her eyes instead. Eyes that held no fear, only a quiet belief that the world could be more beautiful if we just cared a little more. She spoke of her grandmother in Maplewood, who taught her that architecture wasn't just walls and ceilings, it was the feeling you get when you walk inside. He told her something he'd never told anyone, that he grew up in an orphanage and learned not to need anyone, just so no one could leave him again. His voice was rough when he said it, and when he looked up, her eyes were glistening. "You've never had a real home, have you?" she asked softly. "I do. This building." "No," she said. "I said home, not a place to live." The words hit him harder than he expected. Hundreds had praised him for his achievements, yet no one had ever made him feel so bare. From that day, Jay started leaving the office earlier, finding excuses to visit the construction site or to ask about her designs. She made coffee differently, more milk, less sugar, with a hint of cinnamon. He hated cinnamon, but every time he smelled it in the hallway, he felt peace. Portland still rained, but the rain no longer felt cold. The October rain turned into music, slow, endless, but somehow alive again. Each drop had a rhythm now, the rhythm of a heart learning to beat again. The building began to take shape, and on those late nights when only the two of them remained in the office, warm lights glowing, pencils scratching softly, and sometimes just silence, Jay discovered how comforting silence could be. Tara would often laugh when he frowned at her drawings. "You design like you're building a prison," she teased. "A prison? I call it structure." "No," she said, looking straight at him. "It's fear. You build walls because you're afraid." He didn't reply, because she was right and it hurt. After that night, he began to dream. In his dreams, his penthouse was filled with golden light, laughter, the scent of coffee, the sound of footsteps that weren't his. He woke up smiling and startled, because he couldn't remember the last time he had. The late nights became routine. The blueprints on his desk became the reason, and terror became the missing piece in his once empty world. One evening, when Portland finally paused its rain, she pulled him up to the rooftop. "Have you ever looked at the city from here?" she asked. "I see it every day." "No," she smiled. "You see, but you don't look." She handed him a cup of coffee and pointed down at the glowing city below. "See all those lights? Every one of them is someone trying their best. They don't need grand towers, they just need someone waiting for them to come home." Her voice was soft, but the words pierced deep. He turned to her, her eyes warm, close, inviting him out of his armor. "And you?" he asked quietly. "Who waits for you?" "Maybe my grandma, but she passed last year." She smiled faintly. "So, no one now." They stood still, wind brushing past. Then she smiled again, a sad, hopeful smile. "But I still believe everyone has someone waiting, no matter how late." Jay didn't answer. He just looked at her. Maybe in that exact moment, he knew his walls were beginning to fall. The next day, everything was the same. He was still the boss. She was still the employee, yet something invisible had changed. A quiet knowing neither dared to name. She began leaving books on his desk about human-centered design, green architecture, and poetry. He never read poetry, but every night he'd open one of those books, just to see her small signature in the corner. Tarara Allen. One evening, they stayed even later than usual. The city shimmered beneath them. The rain returned. She stood by the glass, palm against the cold surface. "Do you know what's the scariest thing about success?" she asked. "What?" "Realizing you've achieved everything except happiness." The words hung in the air. Jay stepped closer, standing right behind her, close enough to catch the faint scent of her skin. He didn't know why, he just wanted to touch her shoulder, to make sure she was real. She turned, and the space between them vanished. No words, only city lights reflected in their eyes, melting into one another. The first kiss came slow, as if they were both afraid it might break if they rushed it. Rain fell outside, and inside that glass tower, two lonely souls finally found shelter. After that, Jay was no longer the same. He laughed more, stopped working past 6, learned to make coffee with milk, listened to her stories about small schools and warm spaces, learned that happiness didn't need to be grand, only near. The office buzzed with rumors, the once cold CEO now wearing a wooden ring, smiling at his phone. And for the first time in his life, home wasn't a steel tower, but the woman waiting for him there, holding a cup of cinnamon coffee. Sometimes he woke up at night to see her sleeping beside him, her small hand resting over his heart. For the first time, he didn't feel empty. He felt peace. If you'd asked back then, was Underh Hill happy? Yes. But he didn't know that happiness was already counting down quietly, gently to the moment it would break. Because every beautiful story begins with rain, and usually ends in a storm. And when that storm comes, all he'll have left are those 4 words. The words that cost him everything. I'm busy. Handle it yourself. That winter in Portland was freezing. The sky was thick and grey, the rain like tiny needles, and people's breaths steamed in the air. In the 68th floor penthouse, Underh Hill still sat at his desk as the clock slid past 3 in the morning. The city slept. Only a single light fell across his face, the face of a man who'd won, but had no one to share the victory with. His laptop blinked the number for the contract he'd just signed, $92 million. A vast project, a historic step. He leaned back and poured a drink. On the desk, Tara's little ceramic cup sat beside a stack of files. Next to it, the wooden ring she'd given him, engraved with the word, home. Home. He smiled quietly. She always talked about home, while he only knew success. And perhaps, from the day she stepped into his life, Jay began to be afraid. Afraid of losing control. Fearful of being needed. Afraid of love. For months, the company had been tied up in a software copyright lawsuit. The papers wrote stories, rivals spread rumors. The stock fell. Jay stayed awake, chained to meetings, cold with everyone, even her. But what he didn't see was that while he was trying to save the company, someone nearby needed only for him to turn around and hold them, and that would have been enough. That day, Tara stood outside his office for more than 10 minutes before knocking. She wore a long knit coat, held a small paper bag in her hand, her face a mixture of worry and happiness. Jay, I have something to tell you. He didn't look up. Not now, Tara. I'm in a conference with the legal team. She bit her lip and waited. The meeting stretched on another 40 minutes. She stayed, while the clock neared 8 and the rain began again. When the meeting ended, Jay closed his eyes, rubbed his temples. She walked up, set the paper bag on the desk. Can you look at me for a moment? Her voice trembled, but her eyes tried to stay steady. He opened his eyes and saw, for the first time that day, something outside of the battles he was fighting. What is it? He asked. She smiled, her hands clenched. I'm pregnant, Jay. All sound fell away, only the rain hitting the glass, steady and cold. She pulled from the bag a small card. Inside were 2 tiny faded footprints. I don't know how to say this, she said, but I wanted you to be the first to know. Jay looked at the card. He felt nothing but fatigue. Anxiety crowded his head. Numbers, the lawsuit, the project, everything spinning. He leaned back and sighed. Now is not the time to talk about this, Tara. I just wanted you to know. I'm swamped. Handle it yourself. She froze. He had just said it. I'm busy. Handle it yourself. The words dropped like a heavy stone into the already cold room. She stared at him, waited 1 second, 2, 3, hoping he would say something else. But he only leaned down and stared at his screen. She inhaled, picked up the paper bag. All right, I understand. Her voice was disturbingly calm. You don't have to worry. I'll handle it myself. She turned and left. The door closed very softly, but inside Jay something small cracked. He didn't pay attention. When he looked up, only a cold cup of coffee and a forgotten yellow umbrella by the chair remained. 2 days later, Tara didn't come to the office. He thought she was angry. A week, 2 weeks passed. Still she didn't return. HR reported she'd taken an extended leave for personal reasons. He meant to call, but every time he lifted the phone, pride stopped his hand. She said she'd handle it herself, he repeated, consoling himself as if that made him not a coward. Months passed. The company won the lawsuit. The press crowned him the icon of a new generation. At the victory party, friends raised their glasses, lights flashed, laughter roared. But among the music, he felt the empty chair beside him. The bartender asked, "Anything else?" "A cinnamon coffee. We only serve alcohol here." "I know." That night he got drunk, stumbled through the rain, collapsed at his door, his head spinning with the faint scent of cinnamon. He did not know that hundreds of miles away, a woman lay on a delivery table, gritting her teeth through the pain, with only wind and tears for company. Terror gave birth to twins, 2 boys, Tiger and George. She looked at them, their grey eyes mirroring Portland's sky. She smiled, but her heart ached. "They look just like their father," she whispered. 3 years passed. Jay continued living the same way, cold, busy, impeccable. But sometimes, between contracts, a small image surfaced, a yellow umbrella, a card with tiny footprints. Each time he thought about it, he told himself, "She'll be fine." Yet there were nights in the lit penthouse when he woke in a sweat, convinced he heard someone whisper outside the glass. That call was vague but persistent. He stepped out onto the balcony and looked across the city at the tiny lights. Below, there were thousands of roofs, maybe somewhere. Someone was reading a story to a child. Child. The word squeezed his chest. He had never honestly thought about it until that night. For the first time he asked himself, if she kept the baby, how old would it be now? There was no answer, only wind and rain. The next morning he arrived at the office earlier than usual, pulled her personnel file. Her file had been archived. In a drawer he found an old unsealed envelope addressed simply, "For Jay." His hand shook. Inside was an unopened letter. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting small but resolute. "You don't need me to be rescued. I only need you to believe that some things are worth stopping for." He sat motionless in the vast office, reading the lines until tears fell. An invincible, cold, haughty Jay Underhill sat there, trembling like a lost child. He picked up the old yellow umbrella, the only thing she'd left, and realized he'd never won the only things that mattered. The sentence, "I'm busy, handle it yourself," became a verdict in his heart. Every time he looked in the mirror, he saw the man who had killed a love with 4 simple words. Out there, in a small town called Maplewood, 2 5-year-old boys ran through the pines, laughing. Their mother watched them, and each time the rain fell, she felt a jolt, for every Oregon rain carried a memory she did not want to relive. The man who taught her how to love, then left her on the road. But she didn't know that, across the city, the man himself sat silent, watching the same rain 3 years later, whispering something no one heard. "I was wrong, Tara, and I will pay for it for the rest of my life." The bus left Portland before dawn. Faraway streetlights stretched into golden ribbons along the wet road. Tara sat in the back seat, clutching a small bag inside, a crumpled ultrasound, and a card with 2 tiny footprints. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to go, had to leave the city, had to leave the man she once thought she'd build a home with. Outside the window, Oregon's rain followed her gentler than Portland's, softer, like it was trying to comfort someone running away. A road sign flashed by. Maplewood, 21 miles. The name stirred something inside her. It was where her grandmother once lived, where childhood smelled like raspberries, running water, and the warm scent of pies drifting from the cafe at the foot of the hill. When the bus stopped in Maplewood Square, the morning mist still blanketed everything. The little town lay still, like a painting left untouched. Slanted rooftops, chimney smoke curling into the sky, tall pines standing watch along the streets. No one knew who she was, and she didn't need them to. The Copper Kettle Cafe still stood on the corner, old but warm. Birdie Miller, the silver-haired owner with brown speckled hands, looked up as Tara pushed open the door. "What can I get you, sweetheart?" "A cup of coffee, and maybe a job." Birdie eyed her, sharp but kind. "Where you from?" "Portland." "Leave someone behind there?" Tara paused, then nodded. Birdie simply grunted, poured coffee into a mug. "In Maplewood. We don't ask much. If you want to stay, come early tomorrow. I could use a hand behind the counter." And just like that, Tara's new life began quietly, without grand plans or promises, born from a simple offer. Her grandmother's wooden house stood deep along Maple Creek Road, wrapped in pine and damp wood scent. Dust covered everything, yet in the afternoon light, it still looked beautiful. "Home again," she whispered. Days passed at the slow rhythm of a small town. In the morning, she opened the window and breathed the smell of wet grass. In the afternoon, she worked at the copper kettle wiping tables, brewing coffee, smiling at strangers. At night, she sat by the window, rereading pages from her old journal. The people of Maplewood were kind, busy with gardens, children, and harvests. They greeted her with smiles instead of questions, and somehow, that was enough to make her feel safe. By the 6th month of her pregnancy, Birdie noticed. One morning, she set down a cup of coffee and looked at the slight bump under Tara's apron. "Don't worry," she said. "Keep working. Around here, everyone's got a chapter they'd rather forget." Tara's throat tightened. No one asked. No one pried. Birdie just placed a hand on her shoulder, gently. "Good coffee takes time to steep," she said. "So do people." When the day came, Maplewood was buried in snow. No one was there except Birdie and the town doctor. Tara bit her lip, sweat in her hair until 2 cries broke through the cold air. One high, one low, a harmony of life itself. Tiger and George, that's what she named them, strong and gentle. Both had silver-gray eyes, the perfect mix of Oregon's sky and the man she both loved and resented. She kissed their foreheads and whispered, "Let's start over, okay?" The first 3 years in Maplewood taught Tara how to live again, how to laugh, how to trust. The boys grew up among the trees, running barefoot through grass, counting pebbles, falling asleep to the whisper of wind. The copper kettle became their little world. In the mornings, Birdie roasted coffee, the smell drifting through the streets. By noon, the place filled with townsfolk sharing stories about crops, school, and life. And at night, when the cafe went quiet, Tara sat by the window sketching designs she'd never send anywhere. Birdie often squinted at her, half amused. "You draw a lot. Planning something?" "I'm not sure," Tara smiled. "Maybe just for fun. In this town, for fun is the best reason to do anything." The line made her think of him, of how he once said, "We do things for results, not feelings." She shook her head and smiled faintly. Memories, like coffee foam, rise for a moment, then fade away. In her second autumn there, a mechanic named Curtis began visiting the cafe. He was quiet, kind, sometimes stayed late to fix a lamp or help tidy up. Birdie teased. Tiger asked directly, "Mr. Curtis, do you want to be our dad?" The cafe erupted in laughter. Tara blushed. She didn't scold him, just stroked his hair. "Sweetheart, no one can replace anyone." That night, after the boys fell asleep, she opened her sketchbook to an old drawing, the unfinished building she and Jay once designed together. It used to be their dream. Now it was just broken lines and a hollow space in the middle. She never told anyone about the twins' father. Not out of shame, simply because no one asked. In Maplewood, people shared kindness, not curiosity, and she was grateful for that. One afternoon, while cleaning the cafe, George, the quieter of the two, suddenly asked, "Mom, why don't we have a dad?" Tara froze, turned to him. She'd known the question would come someday, but her heart still clenched. "You do have a dad," she said softly. "Then where is he?" "In a faraway city, but I think, if he knew about you too, he'd love you very much." George nodded, eyes distant. Tiger chimed in. "Does he know we like dinosaurs?" "Not yet," she smiled. "But he will someday, if he ever comes back." The words were light, but inside her, a storm stirred. Did he still remember? Would he ever, one rainy day in Portland, notice a yellow umbrella? Winter came slow. Maplewood wrapped itself in thick fog, small and peaceful. Tara brewed coffee while the boys drew on the floor. In their drawings was a tall man, brown hair, grey eyes, standing beside their mother. "Who's that?" she asked. George answered, "Dad. I dreamed he was standing by the door, smiling at me." Her throat tightened. Tiger giggled. "I dreamed about Dad too, but he fell chasing dinosaurs." Their laughter filled the little wooden house, floating out into the wind. Tara watched them, her heart both warm and aching. 3 years had passed. She no longer hoped to see him again. Yet sometimes, on long rainy nights, she still turned toward the window, as if somewhere in that faraway city, someone might also be awake, staring at the same storm. Maplewood kept living its quiet way, gentle, unhurried, never asking too much. And she kept brewing coffee, smiling, sketching dreams no one would ever see, and holding close a secret all her own. One day, fate would knock on her door, carrying everything she once ran from. But not today. Today, all she knew was this. Here, with 2 little boys and the scent of cinnamon coffee, she was home. And sometimes, home is simply the place where you can be silent, and no one asks why. 3 years after terror left Portland, the city sky was still raining as if it had forgotten how to shine. Underh Hill was now a legend. The man who could turn ideas into gold, deals into myths. He had everything, and nothing. Underh Hill Dynamics had opened 3 new branches. The company's stock hit record highs. The press hailed him as the man who never sleeps. But the man behind those headlines opened, every night, a small wooden cabinet in his penthouse, the only place no one else was allowed to touch. Inside was a yellow umbrella, and an old card, faded with time, marked by 2 tiny footprints. He had hired people to find her, but she had vanished. No medical records, no bank account, no address. Gone, as if she'd never existed. Whenever the Portland rain fell, Jay would stand by the window, watching 1,000 droplets race down the glass, imagining her voice echoing somewhere in the storm. Do you know what's the scariest thing about success? He'd close his eyes and whisper back, losing the only person who made it mean something. No. That year, he did something strange. He founded the Allen Foundation, a scholarship for single mothers studying design. The media called it an act of compassion, but it was really his confession, too late, too quiet, but real. Time doesn't heal. It just teaches you how to hide the scars deeper. And then, one stormy spring day, fate decided not to let him hide anymore. His black BMW sliced through the rain on Highway 26. He was driving to a meeting in Salem, a rural town, 2 hours from Portland. He rarely traveled, but this project promised a new frontier. Halfway there, the car shook violently, engine dead. Lights out. Jay pulled over, rain slamming against the windshield, wipers thrashing. He checked his phone. No service. Perfect, he muttered, grabbing his coat and stepping into the storm. Rain tore at the air. Through the blur of water, a flickering light appeared, an old gas station. He trudged toward it, shoes sinking into mud. The glass door rattled in the wind. Inside, an older man watched a tiny TV, glancing up when Jay entered. Car breakdown? Yeah, need a tow to the nearest town. Only one round here, Maplewood, about 8 miles out. Jay nodded. The name sounded strange, but somehow warm. The older man called for a tow truck. It'd be over an hour. Jay sat on a wooden chair, watching the rain thicken outside. Then, through the silver curtain of water, he saw 3 figures walking. A woman, her umbrella flipped inside out, clutching it against the wind, and 2 small children beside her, each holding a carton of milk. An ordinary scene. Yet his heart stopped. That silhouette, the way she bent to shield the kids, the clumsy strength in her stride, so familiar it hurt to breathe. He pushed the door open. Rain struck his face like ice. She turned. The world went silent. Only rain remained. Tirora Allen, no mistaking her. Her hair was longer, her face thinner, her eyes deeper, but it was her, the woman he'd been searching for, the one he'd broken beyond repair. 2 small children hid behind her legs, peering curiously at the stranger. And in that instant, Jay saw what made his chest tighten. Their eyes, silver gray, just like his. She didn't speak, didn't flinch. Her gaze wasn't angry or hurt, just calm. Too calm. His voice cracked. Terror, is that you? She nodded once. Yes, it's me. Rain poured down the road, roaring between them. The children huddled close, whispering. Jay looked at them, at himself, reflected in their eyes, and everything fell into place. He swallowed hard. There. She squeezed their hands. Her voice was quiet, but firm. They're what you told me to handle myself. The world collapsed around him. He stood frozen in the rain, nailed to the ground. Her words cut through the years like knives. Handle it yourself. 3 years. 3 years he'd told himself she was fine, that she'd moved on, that he wasn't worth remembering. And now, with his own words, she returned the sentence he'd given her. Terra. Don't, she interrupted, her tone steady, almost merciless. Don't say sorry. I'm sure you've said it in your head 1,000 times already. He said nothing. She exhaled slowly. I don't blame you anymore. If you hadn't said those words that day, maybe I'd never have learned how strong I could be. I did handle it, Jay, just like you told me to. And the kids, they're doing great. The 2 children, quiet until now, finally looked up. The messy-haired one, Tiger, whispered, Mom, who's that man? She knelt, smiling soft, but sad. An old friend. Jay nearly fell to his knees. He looked at the boys, then at her. There were 1,000 things he wanted to say about the sleepless nights, the dreams where he called her name, the letter that never reached her, but all that came out was 2 trembling words. I'm sorry. She smiled faintly, without warmth. Jay, some things, once lost, can't be brought back with an apology. The rain grew heavier. The older man shouted from the station, Tow truck's here. She nodded a polite thanks, took her son's hands, and walked past him. But as they passed, one of the boys, George, turned and handed him a damp piece of paper. A child's drawing. 3 people smiling under the rain, holding a yellow umbrella. Mister, do you like dinosaurs? Jay knelt, rain mixing with tears. Yes, I do. Then you can keep this. Thank you, George. The boy blinked. How'd you know my name? Jay smiled weakly. Just a lucky guess. George grinned and ran back to his mother. Jay stood there, watching as the 3 figures faded into the downpour. She didn't look back. He didn't move. He just stood still, letting the second rain wash over him, the rain of realization, of repentance, of a love he thought had died but was suddenly, painfully alive again. That night, Jay didn't return to Portland. He rented a small room in Maplewood, the town that never asked too many questions. The landlord handed him the key without a word. Inside, a bed, a wooden table, the smell of pine. He sat down and took the drawing from his pocket. The paper was soaked, colors blurred, but the 3 smiling faces still shone through. He laid it gently on the table as if laying down his own heart. Outside, rain drummed softly on the roof. For the first time in years, Jay Underh Hill didn't feel alone. Because somewhere in this quiet town were the 3 lives he had lost, and now, with whatever time he had left, he would find a way to make it right. He looked at the drawing and whispered, If you can forgive me even just a little, I'll stay. I won't leave again. The rain kept falling gentle and endless like destiny's slow applause. This second rain no longer carried loss. It carried an invitation to stay, to begin again, if he was brave enough to love one more time. Jay woke to the sound of a woodpecker and the faint smell of waffles drifting through the window. No towers of glass, no phones ringing, no assistants knocking at his door. Just a small rented room, sunlight slipping through the curtains, and the chill creeping down his collar. He brewed coffee with the old kettle left by the landlord. The taste was bitter, slightly sour, nothing like the polished blends of Portland. But somehow, he finished the cup and felt quiet. That day, he drove around town. Maplewood was so small it took only 10 minutes to cross from one end to the other. Wooden houses, a flower shop, a bookstore, a diner, and in the town center a wooden sign that read, Copper Kettle Cafe. He recognized it instantly. Tara was there. He parked a few yards away, sitting in the car, watching through the glass. She wore a brown apron, her hair tied high, wiping the counter. 2 little boys ran around her, laughing. A scene so simple, so ordinary, yet for him, it was the dream he had never dared to touch. He sat there for hours, not entering and just watching. When dusk came, the silver-haired owner, Birdie, though he didn't know her name yet, stepped outside to hang a closed sign. She caught sight of him, squinting with that sharp, knowing look only small-town women have. You the one sitting in that car all this time? Jay nodded. I was just passing through. Yeah, she said with a small snort. That's what everyone says about Maplewood. But nobody leaves right away. Her words made him smile faintly, even as his heart grew heavy. That night, he didn't open his laptop. For the first time in years, he didn't work. Instead, he pulled up a map, found Maplewood Community Center, and wrote an email. I'd like to fund the renovation of the children's playground. No name recognition needed. Just make sure the kids have somewhere safe to play. The next morning, he bought a hammer, some planks, and joined the local volunteers fixing the park. No one recognized him, no suit, no designer watch, no trace of the CEO. Just a tall, quiet man who worked hard and smiled sometimes when the kids laughed nearby. At lunch, someone mentioned, Copper Kettle's hiring another server. Jay looked up. The cafe in the town center? Yep, Birdie's place. Best coffee in Maplewood. And for that afternoon, he parked across the street again. Tara stood behind the counter, tired but calm. The boys sat near the window, coloring. Tiger drew dinosaurs. George painted rain and sunshine together on the same page. When she looked up and caught his eyes, Jay nodded slightly. She froze for a heartbeat, then turned away, wiping the counter as if nothing had happened. He understood. Sometimes, to truly see someone, you have to stand far enough not to hurt them. From that day, he came to the cafe every morning. Always the same order, cinnamon latte. He didn't talk much, just read, occasionally glancing up when the boys played. On the third day, George walked over with a piece of paper. I drew a dinosaur for you, he said. Ye smiled. Thank you. Mom said your name's Jay? He nodded. That's right. I like you, Mr. Jay. The words hit him like sunlight through rain. A child liked him not for money, not for fame, just because he was there. Maybe that was what he'd been missing all his life. The quiet grace of simply showing up. That evening, as Tara wiped the tables, she said softly, You don't have to do this. Do what? Come here every day. I'm not doing anything, just drinking coffee. Jay, Maplewood doesn't need anyone's pity. He met her eyes. Neither do I. She didn't answer, just folded the cloth and walked away. He stayed until closing time, listening to the boys' laughter drift through the dusk. To him, that laughter was music. Days passed. Maplewood got used to the quiet stranger who showed up at the cafe each morning and helped at the park or the library in the afternoon. Slowly, without anyone noticing, he became part of the town. One morning, after a night of rain, one of the wooden steps outside the cafe broke. When Tara discovered it, it had already been replaced solid, freshly painted the same color. Next to it was a small note taped down. No payment needed, just something that needed doing. She knew who it was, said nothing, just folded the note and tucked it into her pocket. That night, she found him waiting outside. You fixed the steps? She asked. He smiled. Yeah, just passing by. You don't have to prove anything. I'm not proving. I'm learning how to show up. She stopped. His eyes held no pleading, no excuses, only quiet sincerity, heavier than any apology. After that, she began letting him help little things, fixing a light, carrying supplies, walking the boys to school. Everything came slowly, gently, without promises. Birdie, who saw everything, said one day while Tara was brewing coffee, He doesn't look like someone who gives up easy. I know, Tara said, but I'm not someone who forgives easy either. Forgiving isn't about who deserves it, Birdie replied. It's about who needs peace. The words stayed with Tara all afternoon. One night, the sky broke open again. The boys were playing at the park when thunder rolled, and Tiger fell, scraping his knee. Before she could reach him, Jay was already there soaked, holding the crying boy in his arms. It's okay, I've got you. Tiger sobbed, then went still, resting against his shoulder. Tara ran up, both angry and afraid. You don't have to involve yourself in everything. He placed the boy down gently, voice steady. I know, but when I see them fall, I can't just stand still. She looked at him, the man who once commanded rooms now trembling because a child got hurt. Her heart stumbled. The next day, Tiger insisted on thanking Mr. J. He handed over a new drawing, a man in a raincoat holding a child. Underneath, in crooked letters, Hero. Tara smiled through tears. She knew forgiveness never came overnight. But maybe, sometimes, it began the moment someone chose to get wet in the same rain with you. A month later, Maplewood turned to autumn. Leaves went gold, the air lifted, and people talked about the coming fall festival. Jay still sat in his usual corner, quietly reading. But now, every morning, the boys ran up to him before school to say hello. Tara had grown used to his presence. She didn't invite him in, but she didn't send him away. Didn't speak much, but when she brewed coffee, she always added a touch of cinnamon, even when no one asked. And so, in that small, misty town, a man was learning everything all over again. How to listen, how to wait, how to love without owning. He finally understood the art of showing up isn't about grand gestures. It's about choosing to be there, every single day, even when the person you love isn't ready to see you yet. That winter, Maplewood was colder than ever. Wind rolled down from the Cascades, carrying damp air and the faint, smoky scent of burning pine from old stoves. The Copper Kettle Cafe had become the town's refuge, warm in the mornings, fragrant at night, always echoing with the laughter of two small boys at the foot of the counter. Jay still came every day. By now, no one saw him as a stranger. People waved when they passed. "Morning, Jay." And Birdie, the silver-haired owner, would raise an eyebrow each time he walked in. Still not tired of cinnamon coffee. He'd grin. "No, I'm addicted now." Tara would smile faintly and turn away. Since the night he carried Tiger through the rain, her walls had softened. She hadn't forgiven him, not entirely, but she no longer pushed him away. Between them was a silence wide enough for trust to grow again, like grass after frost. Early December. Snow began to fall in soft threads. The town shimmered under pale fog and golden streetlights. That night, the Copper Kettle stayed open late. The elementary school was holding its winter recital. Tiger and George had minor roles. Jay, as always, came early to help set up tables and chairs. Tara wore an old blue sweater, hair loose, smiling gently though her eyes showed worry. "You don't have to stay, Jay. Go home, you've got work tomorrow. It's more fun here. Maplewood isn't really your world." He looked at her, voice low. "I'm trying to make it mine." "Nah." Before she could answer, the boys shouted from outside, "Mom, it's the first snow." They ran out, laughing, faces lit by the streetlight. Jay stood in the doorway, watching them, heart tightening. 3 years ago, he'd missed a night just like this. Now, he wanted to hold on to it no matter what it cost. Later that night, after the event, Tara and the boys climbed to the small apartment above the cafe. The wind whistled through cracks in the window frame. Snow thickened. Smoke from nearby chimneys curled against the black sky. She lit the fireplace and told them stories. "When the snow melts, we'll build a snowman. Okay? With a carrot nose?" Tiger asked. "Of course," she smiled. She didn't know that downstairs, a small spark had slipped from a frayed outlet near the counter. One gust of wind and that spark turned into flame. Around 10 p.m., Jay was reading in his rented room when he heard the sirens. Sharp, rising urgent. He stepped to the balcony and froze. A column of black smoke rose from the center of town from the direction of the Copper Kettle. He didn't think. He grabbed his coat and ran. The fire glowed like a wound tearing through the night. When he arrived, people were shouting, pulling hoses, choking on smoke. The upper floor was already burning. "Where's Tara? The kids?" he shouted. No one answered, only the roar of flames, the wind, the panic. He had one thought, not this time. He ran straight in. Someone tried to stop him. He shoved them away. Smoke clawed his throat. His eyes burned. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. The wooden stairs cracked beneath him. He kept going. "Tara!" he shouted. "Tara!" A faint cough answered. He kicked the door open. There she was, huddled in a closet, the boys clinging to her, smoke curling around them. "Jay!" she gasped, terrified. "Give me the kids." He scooped both boys into his arms and ran. The ceiling groaned. Sparks rained down. The fire caught his sleeve, but he didn't stop. Outside, people screamed when his silhouette burst through the smoke. He handed the children to the firefighters, then turned back. "Jay!" Tara screamed. "Don't. I won't leave you again." He plunged inside once more. The world was a blur of heat and shadow. He found her, half collapsed, coughing. He pulled her close, guiding her out. The roof gave way just as he pushed her through the doorway. The world exploded in red and ash. When Jay opened his eyes, everything was white. The smell of antiseptic, the beeping of monitors, bright light stabbing his vision. A familiar voice whispered, "You're awake." Tara sat beside the bed, arm bandaged, pale but steady. "The boys?" his voice rasped. "They're fine. Sleeping." He closed his eyes, a tear slipping down his temple. "I thought I was too late." "You weren't," she said softly, taking his hand. "You saved them. You saved me." He turned to her hand in his, small, work-roughened, scarred. For the first time, he dared to hold it. "Thank you for still being here. Thank you for finally showing up." They sat in silence. Outside, snow fell white, slow, forgiving. The fire destroyed much of the cafe. The town came together, some brought wood, some paint, everyone wanting to rebuild their second home. Jay stayed. His arm was bandaged, but he worked every day clearing debris, sanding walls, rebuilding doors. People wondered aloud, "A man that rich, why is he doing this himself?" He only smiled. "Some things only matter if you do them yourself." Tara watched quietly. The man who once commanded thousands now moved bricks with bare hands, painted in the cold, never complained. Sometimes she'd wake at night, look out, and see him still working under the yellow streetlight, breath fogging in the air. When the cafe reopened, Birdie said, "It's even prettier than before." Jay only glanced at Tara. "Not because of me," he said, "because of Maplewood." She understood. He meant because of you. But he had learned some truths don't need to be said aloud. One afternoon, as the snow melted, the boys ran up in their coats, laughing. "Dad!" Tiga shouted. All three adults froze. The boy covered his mouth instantly. George's eyes went wide. Tara smiled gently. "It's okay, sweetheart." Jay knelt, eyes glistening. He brushed Tiger's hair, his voice trembling. "Thank you for calling me that." That night, after the cafe closed, Tara sat with him on the porch. Firelight flickered on their faces. "I don't think I've forgiven you completely," she said. He nodded. "I know, but I'm done being angry. I'm just tired of hating you." Then let me love what's left," he whispered. She turned, eyes shining in the glow. Didn't answer, just nodded, faintly, like snow melting at dawn. Maplewood slept in peace. Snow drifted outside. The boys breathed softly in their room, and the wind whispered through the pines. Jay sat in the dark, staring at his hands scarred, blistered, rough, and for the first time, he found them beautiful. Because they bore the marks of someone who had finally learned how to love. He wrote a single line in his notebook. "When fire comes, you might lose everything. But sometimes, it's the fire that teaches you how to hold on to what truly matters." He closed the book and looked toward the window, where Tara's reflection glowed softly in the lamplight as she slept. Outside, the snow kept falling, and somewhere in the distance, Birdie's voice seemed to echo. In Maplewood, people don't ask too many questions. They just watch to see if you'll stay. Jay smiled. He had already answered with his whole life. Maplewood's hospital was small, cream-colored walls, a faint antiseptic scent, and the wind whispering through glass windows. Jay lay on the bed, both hands still wrapped in white bandages. His fingers were raw but moving again. The doctor said he was lucky a few seconds later, and the smoke could have stopped his lungs. Tara sat beside him in silence. She hadn't left since the night of the fire. Sometimes she read. Sometimes she just watched him sleep. Sometimes she simply sat there, listening to the beeping heart monitor like a clock counting back the things they'd lost. Birdie was looking after the boys, and Maplewood, as small towns do, whispered about the strange man who ran into the fire twice. But inside this room, there was no hero, only a man who'd once feared love so much he ran from it, and who now was learning to love with everything he had left. On Tuesday afternoon, the doctor brought in an insurance form for Tara to sign. At the top, the patient's name was printed clearly. "Holloway, yai." She froze. "Holloway?" "Oh yes," the doctor said casually. "That's the legal record. Must have been a name change at some point, old documents, you know. Then he left. Tara looked down at the paper, brows furrowed. She turned to Jay. Holloway, what is that? He said nothing. She placed the form on the table. Is that your name? He nodded slowly. My old one. The silence between them thickened. Why did you change it? She asked softly. Why hide it from me? He stared up at the ceiling, exhaled. Because that name carried everything I wanted to forget. Pale light fell over his bandaged hands as he began to speak, voice low, almost a whisper. I was born Jay Holloway. My parents weren't good people. They ran an investment fund, cheated hundreds. When everything collapsed, they left me behind 14 years old in a house sealed by the police. I remember watching them take everything away. My parents never turned back. He swallowed hard. Gaze distant. I went into foster care, shuffled from one house to another. No one wanted a kid named Holloway, the son of criminals. Everywhere I went, I heard, watch him, don't let him steal anything. So I learned silence, learned not to trust, learned to rely only on myself. Terror gripped the blanket, chest tight. He went on. When I was old enough, I worked like a madman. I wanted to prove I wasn't like them. I changed my name to Underh Hill, something that sounded like climbing, rising, escaping. I thought losing the name meant losing the past, but all I did was bury it alive. He paused, voice breaking. The day you said you were pregnant, I heard my mother's voice in my head. Family will only drag you down, Jay. Don't get attached. I got scared. Scared of love. Scared of failure. Scared I'd hurt someone the way they hurt me. And I did exactly what I feared most. I left you. The room fell silent, except for the steady beep of the monitor. Tara didn't speak. Jay looked at her, eyes wet. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed. I wanted you to love Underh Hill, the strong one, the clean one, the one untouched by the past. But I'm just that Holloway boy pretending not to be afraid. She reached out and laid her hand over his, the hand wrapped in white, trembling. I don't care if you're Underh Hill or Holloway, she said quietly. I just care about the man sitting in front of me now. He turned his face away, tears slipping down not of weakness, but of release. That evening, the boys came to visit. George carried his sketchbook. He placed it on the bed and flipped to the first page. 3 people standing under a rainbow. A man with bandaged hands smiling wide. This is Dad, he said. Tara froze. Who told you to draw that? No one, he said simply. I just knew. Jay's throat tightened. George added, your name's too long. I just wrote Dad. Jay laughed, broken, shaking, full of tears. When he was discharged, he refused to go back to Portland. Instead, he rented a small wooden house near the park, 2 rooms, low roof, windows facing the pines. Tara helped him move in. The boys ran through the rooms, shouting about how it smells like trees. As she got ready to leave, he said, thank you for listening. I should have listened sooner, she replied, but maybe you weren't ready to be understood yet. He smiled faintly. I am now. She looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time, the guard in her eyes was gone. Then learn to live with both names, she said. What do you mean? Holloway isn't something to erase. It's the reason Underh Hill exists. Don't deny it, build on it. He nodded slowly. You've taught me more than any school ever could. Don't idealize me, she said softly. I'm just someone who got hurt and doesn't want others to hurt the same way. Days passed. Maplewood settled back into rhythm. The copper kettle reopened busier than ever. People loved the new coffee and loved the story of the man who saved the town. Jay became part of the cafe, fixing lights, delivering beans, helping the boys with math. Sometimes he told them stories, not fairy tales, but truths, about a boy who once believed he didn't deserve love and how he learned to trust again. One afternoon, Tara asked, do you regret leaving the company? No. What about your reputation? Just noise attached to a name. I have another one now, one that matters more. She smiled, turned back to the coffee pot. Seems like you finally get it. I do, he said. What matters isn't the name you carry, it's who says it with love. One quiet evening, the boys went to bed early. Tara and Jay sat on the porch, moonlight weaving through the trees. If you could go back, she asked, would you change anything? He thought for a long while. No, because without the mistakes, I wouldn't know how right this feels. And are you still afraid? Yes, but now I know fear isn't a reason to run. Oko. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I don't know what the future holds. Neither do I, he said. But I know this. I'll be here, every day, with whatever name I have as long as you and the boys still call me Dad. She laughed softly. Underhill still suits you better than Holloway. He smiled. Because Underhill is the man you made real. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, and moonlight spilled silver across the porch. For the first time, Jay felt his past and present standing side by side, not in battle, but in peace. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you for giving me both names, one to remind me I once fell, and one to prove I finally stood back up." Spring came early to Maplewood. The rain washed away the last ashes of winter, leaving the scent of damp earth and wild apple blossoms drifting through the streets. The copper kettle had reopened, a new wooden sign swinging above the door, "Where everything begins again." Jay read that line every morning and every time. He smiled, because he knew it wasn't just the cafe that had been rebuilt. He had two piece by piece, breath by breath. The little house he rented near the park had become the boys' second home. Tiger liked to sprawl on the rug, drawing dinosaurs in a riot of colors. George sat by the window, carefully arranging his collection of stones, pebbles, quartz, bits of sandstone from around town. One Saturday morning, Tara texted him. "The boys want to help you clean the garden. Ready for a natural disaster?" He replied, "Always." 10 minutes later, the wooden gate creaked open. The two boys burst in like wind, clutching toy shovels and brooms. "Dad, I'll sweep the leaves. I'll plant flowers." Jay froze. It was the first time they'd called him Dad naturally, not by accident, not by prompting. That one small word carried more weight than any title he'd ever owned. He knelt, pulling them both into his arms. "All right," he said, smiling through the ache in his chest. "Let's garden." Captain Tiger and Engineer George. Their laughter filled the yard like sunlight. By noon, all three were covered in dirt. Tiger had overturned a pot. George had been sorting rocks instead of planting anything. Tara arrived with sandwiches, leaning against the gate, chuckling at the chaos. She handed Jay a bottle of water. "You're really okay now," she said. "Yeah," he nodded. "For the first time in my life, I feel enough." She tilted her head. "What does that mean?" "It means I don't need anything more. No proving, no running, no winning." He paused, voice soft. "Just being here, with you and them, that's enough." She didn't answer. The sky was deep blue. The wind hummed through the pines. A woodpecker kept rhythm against a trunk, steady, patient, unhurried. That afternoon, Jay took the boys to the park. On the grass, children were playing tag while George sat quietly studying a large rock. "What did you find?" Jay asked. "I think it's volcanic," George said. "It used to be deep underground, really hot, but when it cooled, it became strong and beautiful." "Lynn." Jay brushed a hand over his son's hair, a strange tenderness swelling in his chest. Maybe he was like that rock, once scorched, once broken, and only after cooling down did he realize the strength in simply surviving. Tiger, meanwhile, ran in circles waving a stick. "I'm the superhero saving Mom from the monster," he yelled. Jay laughed. Tiger shoved the stick at him. "You're my sidekick." They fought playfully, rolling in the grass, laughing until they couldn't breathe. For the first time in years, Jay laughed not out of politeness, not for an audience, not for success, but because it felt good to be alive. That evening, Tara brought the boys home. She turned to him at the gate. "You did great today," she said softly. "Dad of the year." He didn't answer, just smiled. And in that fading golden light, his smile said everything words couldn't. Time moved on. Summer came. Maplewood bloomed in shades of red and gold, humming with mountain cicadas. The copper kettle was busier than ever. Jay helped Birdie set up a new Wi-Fi system, while Tara added a kids' art corner where Tiger and George's drawings hung proudly. The biggest one showed 4 people, a family, with the words scrawled underneath. "Our home." Birdie chuckled. "Looks like they've got the definition of family figured out." Jay smiled. and I'm still learning from them. One evening, after closing the cafe, Jay taught Tiger to count coins from the tip jar. George sat on the floor reading a science book. Tara came from the kitchen, drying her hands, and paused at the sight the small, ordinary magic of it. I used to think life would be different, she said quietly. Maybe quieter, maybe just me. And now? He asked. Now it's noisy, messy, unpredictable, but right. He chuckled. You know, I used to think right meant perfect. And now? Now right just means sitting here, hearing them laugh, and you being here too, Lou. She said nothing, just sat beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. That warmth he'd once believed he'd never feel it again. Later that night, they sat outside watching fireflies. The boys darted across the yard, jars in hand. Dad, why do fireflies glow? George asked. Because they have a light inside, Jay said. When they're happy, it shines on its own. Do I have one too? Tiger shouted. Of course. Everyone does as long as you don't let it go out. Tara smiled. That sounds philosophical. He shook his head. No, just something I'm telling myself. She laughed, soft, luminous, and in that moment, Jay saw a future uncertain but bright, like fireflies in summer, tiny, fragile, yet unyieldingly alive. At the end of summer, Maplewood held its harvest festival. The whole town was lit up with lanterns, music spilling through the streets. Tiger wore his superhero cape. George, a cowboy hat. They pulled their parents along, giggling through the crowd. In the square, they stopped by the children's stage. Tara stood beside Jay, the lights reflecting off her hair. He looked at her for a long moment. You know, he said softly, these past few months, I haven't felt successful the way I used to. But I've never felt happier. She turned to him, eyes shimmering. That's because this time, you didn't build a tower, she said. You built people. He chuckled, then fell silent. Music swelled. Lanterns rose into the sky, floating like stars. Tiger pointed upward. Mom, Dad, look, the lights are flying just like my wish. Jay knelt. What did you wish for? Tia Grenell. I wished our family would stay like this forever. Nobody disappears again. Jay looked at Tara. She nodded, eyes bright with tears, and in that moment, he knew he would do everything, anything, to make his son's wish come true. By September, the air in Maplewood had turned crisp. Leaves blazed gold, crunching underfoot on the path leading to the copper kettle. The town was busy preparing for pumpkin season, but in the small house by the park, Jay Underh Hill sat in front of his laptop, the screen's pale glow painting his face in stillness. A new email appeared. Subject line: Invitation from Underhill Dynamics. He opened it. We invite you to return as honorary chairman. The Oregon Tech Park project is struggling. No one can finish it but you. Come back, Jay. Portland needs you. It was signed by Andrew Whitlock, his old friend, now the company's CEO. Jay reread it again and again, emotions swirling nostalgia, pride, and something close to fear. That city, Portland, the place where he'd once had everything, and lost everything. The place he'd left behind in the rain, with nothing but an abandoned yellow umbrella. He closed the laptop and exhaled. Outside, the laughter of his sons drifted in through the window, light and clear as the breeze. Tara was helping them carve pumpkins. Careful with the knife, Tiger. I know, Mom. Dad, look what I made. Jay looked out the window. The sight was so simple, so alive, that the email on his screen suddenly felt like something from another life. Still, that night, long after everyone had fallen asleep, he opened it again. A man standing between two roads. The next morning, he told Tara. She listened quietly. They really want you back? Yeah. Just for a few months, they said. No one else can fix it. Do you want to go? The question caught him. Did he? Part of him still craved the rush, the power, the applause, the rhythm of the chase. But another part, the one that woke to cinnamon coffee and children's laughter, feared that if he went, he might lose it all again. I don't know, he admitted. If you need time, she said gently. I understand. No anger, no reproach. That calm acceptance made his heart feel even heavier. The following week, he lived in two worlds. By day, he built lanterns with the boys, shopped at the farmer's market, painted the fence. By night, he opened the files Andrew sent: blueprints, budgets, forecasts. Those numbers reignited something inside him, that old hunger, flickering like a dormant fire. One evening, terror found him still in front of the screen. The blue light lit his face, cold, distant, familiar. The man she once loved and lost. "Jay," she said softly. He didn't look up. "I'm just reviewing the reports. I didn't say you couldn't. I just worry." "About what?" "About Portland calling and you forgetting that Maplewood is home." He froze. Then he shut the laptop and turned to her. "Tara, I'm not going anywhere if you don't want me to." She shook her head. "It's not about me not wanting it. I just want you to stay because you choose to, not because I make you." She walked away, leaving him in the dim light, and in her absence, he heard the truth he'd long avoided. He'd never really chosen. He used work to hide from feeling, and now he was hiding in love to avoid himself. If he didn't make a choice this time, he'd lose both. 3 days later, Jay drove to Portland, not to return but to face it. The city was the same. Rain, glass, wind, steel. But he wasn't. The Underh Hill Dynamics Tower loomed ahead, the monument he'd once climbed to prove he could. Now, it just looked cold. Andrew met him in the lobby with a half-familiar smile. "Welcome home, Jay." "Home?" Jay chuckled softly. "I have another one now." The meeting stretched long old faces, old contracts, old praise, but his mind kept drifting to small hands, warm laughter, and the smell of cinnamon in the morning. When Andrew said, "You should come back, we can restore what we built," Jay looked out the window at the rain. Then, quietly, he replied, "You know, success without someone to tell it to is just an echo in an empty room. I've been there before. I don't want to go back." Silence filled the room. Jay stood, buttoning his coat. "You'll finish the project, I know you will, but my part's done." As he walked out, he passed an old framed photo of himself, a younger man in a black suit, eyes hard as glass. He paused, smiled faintly. "Goodbye, Underh Hill." On the drive back to Maplewood, the rain returned. He stopped the car, rolled down the window, letting the wind sting his face. Raindrops hit his scarred hands, the ones that had pulled lives out of fire. For once, he didn't feel afraid, only grateful. That night, when he walked into the cafe, the copper kettle lights were still on. Tara was wiping tables, the boys asleep in the corner. He stood in the doorway, dripping wet. "You're home," she said quietly. "Yeah, Lee." He stepped closer, reached into his pocket, and placed a small metal nameplate on the counter. "J. Underh Hill, CEO." "I don't need this anymore." She looked at him for a long time, then asked, "Do you regret it?" He shook his head. "If I'd known back then that regret is how you learn to live better, maybe I wouldn't have had to wait this long." She smiled, her eyes soft. He took her hand. "Tara," he said gently, "what if are the heaviest words I've ever carried? What if I'd listened? What if I hadn't said those 4 words? "Jay," she interrupted, squeezing his hand, "don't live in what if. We're in now." He nodded, smiling through the tears. The boys stirred awake, rubbing their eyes, running toward him. "Tia Grinnell. Dad's home. Did you bring us something?" Jay knelt. "Yeah. A promise." "What kind of promise?" "That I'll never miss another rainy season again." Tara watched, tears slipping down her cheek. Outside, Portland rain fell softly, no longer heavy, no longer cruel. Just a gentle sound of forgiveness, of return. That night, Maplewood was still. Jay sat on the porch, both boys asleep in his arms, Tara leaning against his shoulder. Rain shimmered on the pines, glinting under the porch light. He whispered, "Maybe real happiness isn't about what we achieve, but about having someone beside us in silence and still feeling whole." She nodded, threading her fingers through his, and in that moment, the words "what if" lost all their weight, carried away by the wind, light as rain. The 4th winter in Maplewood came soft and white. Snow blanketed the roof of the copper kettle like whipped cream. A pine tree by the window glowed with golden lights, while inside, a Christmas song hummed from the old radio birdie fondly called the cafe's soul. Jay sat at his usual corner table, grey sweater on, a cup of cinnamon latte in hand. Behind the counter, Tara worked hair loose, smile warm, her eyes occasionally drifting toward him. Their boys ran around the Christmas tree, arguing over who'd place the star on top. "I'm older," Tiger shouted. "No, last time it was you," George protested. Tara laughed, then let Dad decide. Jay set down his cup, walked over, and knelt beside them. "Both of you will do it," he said. "One holds the ladder, one hangs the star. But family's a team," he said softly. "There's no winner, only people who do things together." They looked at each other, then giggled. In that simple moment, a man, a woman, 2 children, a Christmas tree, golden lights. It looked like any other family. But to them, it was a miracle. That year, the copper kettle was busier than ever. People came not just for coffee, but for the story The Man Who Stayed. And Birdie, now mostly seated behind the counter, grinned whenever Jay fumbled with the milk frother. "You still can't get that foam right, can you?" she teased. "I can. It's just uneven. In other words, terrible." Laughter rippled through the cafe. Tara tilted her head toward him. "It's okay," she smiled. "You can keep practicing. I'll teach you." "And if I never get it right? Then you'll have to stay forever." He looked at her, slow, deep, grateful, a smile that carried an entire lifetime. One late December afternoon, Jay took the boys up the hill behind town. The sky was clear, snow falling gently, the lake below glowing pink and orange in the sunset. He spread a blanket. The 3 of them sat watching Maplewood from above wooden rooftops, blue smoke rising, distant church bells. "Dad," George asked, "where did you live before here?" Jay was quiet for a moment. "A place full of lights," he said. "High, bright, and cold." "Oh, why'd you leave?" "Because I found somewhere with fewer lights, but someone waiting for me to come home." Tiger leaned against his shoulder. "I like Maplewood," he murmured. "Mom smiles more here." Jay squeezed his hand. "Yeah," he said softly. "So do I." Christmas Eve filled the cafe wall to wall. The tree sparkled, Birdie hummed along with the radio, and the smell of cinnamon mixed with apple pie. Jay worked the counter, Tara carried trays, and the boys tangled themselves in ribbons near the fireplace. When the clock struck midnight, everyone cheered. "Merry Christmas." Jay turned to Tara. "You know," he said, 4 years ago, I spent Christmas night alone, just rain and a computer screen." "And what do you have now?" she asked. He smiled. "Laughter, 2 kids, and you. And cinnamon coffee," she added, laughing. "Right," he chuckled, "and cinnamon coffee." Her smile softened. "Jay, I used to think forgiveness was the hardest thing, but I think learning to trust again is even harder." He took her hand. "Thank you for trusting me, even if it took time." Outside, snow fell thicker, blurring the windows. A passing customer said to Birdie, "In this town, people don't just brew coffee, they brew new lives." "One thing." Birdie grinned. "Yeah," she said, and someone finally got his recipe right. By March, the snow melted. The pines turned green again. Maplewood woke to another spring. Jay and Tara expanded the cafe, adding a cozy space out back called the Home Corner. It was a place for families to hang photos, leave notes, or simply sit and listen to music. On opening day, Jay hung a wooden sign on the wall. "The things we keep aren't money or fame, but the moments we stop, in the right place, at the right time, with the right people." Visitors read it, smiled quietly, and nodded. Tara leaned over. "I love that line. So do we." "Where's it from?" "From a rainy night," he said, "when I finally realized I couldn't live forever in what if." Summer came. Tiger and George turned 8 school. Friends, endless questions. One day, George brought home a homework essay. "What makes your family special?" He wrote, "My family burned once, but my parents rebuilt it. Now, it's not afraid of fire anymore." Tara laughed through tears as she showed it to Jay. He read silently for a long time, then whispered, "Maybe that's the most accurate thing anyone's ever said about us." That July night, they went camping by the lake. Stars filled the sky, crickets sang, The boys slept in their tent. Jay and Tara sat side by side, fingers intertwined. "Do you still fear losing everything?" she asked. "No," he said. "I only fear not cherishing it enough." She smiled. "Then you're doing just fine." They sat in silence, the wind brushing through their hair. He looked at her, her face lit by moonlight, as gentle as the first night he saw her sketch under an office lamp years ago. "Terra." "Thank you for not giving up on me halfway. Thank you for coming back," she whispered. He exhaled. "I don't know how many years I'll have left," he said softly. "But I know this for every one of them. I'll choose to show up." "Show up?" "Yeah, like I promised you. Not just be there, really be there." She smiled. The breeze moved across the lake, carrying the faint sound of church bells and the scent of grass and coffee still clinging to his sweater. Years later, people in Maplewood still spoke of Underh Hill, not as a brilliant CEO, but as the man who stayed, the one who rebuilt a cafe, saved 3 lives in a fire, and taught children that happiness is when both parents are home on rainy days. And Tara Allen, the woman who once left everything behind, became the town's architect, designing a new school called the Maplewood Hope Center. A bronze plaque at the gate read, "For those who once lost their way and found the road home." Every year, when the rain returned, the 4 of them sat by the window, listening to it drum gently on the roof. Tara brewed coffee, Jay read aloud. Birdie sometimes stopped by to laugh with them. "Mom," Tiger asked once, "why does Dad like listening to the rain so much?" She smiled. "Because rain was the first thing that made him stop." "Stop for what?" "To see what really matters." "Hi." Jay heard her, smiled, and reached for her hand. Outside, the rain fell steady, not heavy, not sad, just soft and alive, like the heartbeat of a man who had finally learned how to stay. "If you've stayed with me till now, thank you. Honestly. Thank you for walking through Jay and Tara's story, through their mistakes, their tears, and the way they learned to love again. If this story makes you believe, even a little more, that people can change, that love can heal, and that sometimes staying is the bravest way to love, then don't forget to subscribe. So next week, we can share another story, gentle, honest, and as real as life itself. And if tonight it rains, let the rain remind you of this. Sometimes, just staying is already a way to love.